consulting has been around for about 11 years now. And these are some of the statistics from the last application cycle alone. These were our final admits to schools in the 2020-2021 application cycle. This is the COVID year, as everyone remembers it by, and these are the results from the last application cycle. Pretty much, I think, we are known to help applicants applying to top 25, 30 business schools in US and Europe. That's the concentration, though we help others as well, but that's where our expertise mainly lies. These are some of the key milestones for round 1 2022 applications. In our earlier webinars, we definitely got more emails requesting for this particular slide. So I decided to put this slide because we are going into fall 2022 applications. So this is a broad, broad brush stroke about, key timelines and dates that, you can look at as schools have started already announcing the deadlines and application forms are being opened up. So you can just take a screenshot of this. And, if you're watching the recording, you can pause and you can take a screenshot as well. I'm not going to spend much time on this one. Okay, so today we are going to speak about, a couple of standard things, but I'm sure that, the insights will be a lot more because everyone on the panel brings very unique insights, experiences, background, and motivations. So first is, why an MBA? Because that timing is really important and every school almost always asks that. Standardized test preparation, will speak a little bit about GMAT and GRE. How about selecting the right fit business school? What factors go in? You've heard me talk about it, but I would really like you to hear from someone who's recently succeeded. Differentiating yourself, I think in an Indian applicant pool, in a hyper competitive Indian applicant pool, I think this becomes a very, very critical factor. Essays, very again, something we get asked about a lot about. Interview preparation, a very key component of the MBA application, often overlooked much until the time that interview is received, and then we'll spend some time on Q&As. Okay. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce today's panel. Okay? I'm going to be speaking with Kshitij, Shreyas, and Mohit, who have admits, who are finally going to be attending Harvard, Wharton, and Kellogg respectively. I'm going to have them introduce themselves. But before going into the panel, I just wanted to say that this, I apologize for the non-diversity on the panel. This was not intentional. There were two, women who were supposed to join us. One, unfortunately, is right now in Scotland, and she's like, I would not have the connection. And the other one has a family emergency. So I really apologize for that. That being said, Hiral Shah, who was supposed to join us as a Columbia admit, she had to back out at the last minute, and this is her email. And so if anyone wants to reach out to her for, she had interviews at Columbia and Booth, and she finally is going to Columbia. Please note down her email. She specifically asked me that you can share my email, and if anyone has any questions, you can reach out to her after this. Okay. Now let's come back to the panel and let's go through a round of introductions. So, I would like you all, Shreyas, Mohit, and Kshitij, I would like you all to introduce yourself by a couple of things. One, your name, the current company that you work for, or, the one that you work for when you applied to business school, like what was your background and everything, the schools that you got interviews from, and the final one that you're attending, and the one thing that you wish you knew when you started your MBA application journey. Let's go from top. Shreyas, we can start.
I can go first. Hey everyone, my name is Shreyas, and I will be attending Wharton this fall. I basically got admits from, interviews from Wharton and Ross, and I will obviously be attending Wharton. And I currently work at the startup called Eightfold.ai, which is a HR tech startup in the artificial intelligence domain. And as for the one thing that I wish I knew while I was applying was, I guess it has to be the fact that, I sort of, when I applied in round 1, the letter of recommendations that I sort of submitted, I hadn't put much thought into them, but I kind of realized the importance and weightage that carries, because that is the only impression that schools get of you that is from a third party. So I put a lot more thought into my letter of recommendations and what sort of goes into that while I was applying in the second round again. So yeah, over to you, Kshitij.
Hey, thanks, Shreyas. Hi everyone, this is Kshitij. I currently work at Airtel in the strategy team for digital connectivity for enterprises. I got my interview invites from Kellogg, LBS, INSEAD, Wharton, and Harvard. And finally, will be attending Harvard in coming fall. One thing I wish I had known for this application process would be while we have the GMAT and the application and the essays, one thing which we often discount is the networking which it will take in the application process itself, where you have to talk to the current students, the alumni, not just to figure out the best fit of the school for you, but also to get the content which you will put in some of the applications. So for folks who are applying to multiple schools, this is just factor in that time as well. Over to you, Mohit.
Thank you, Kshitij. So, hello everyone. I am Mohit. I work for Omnibus Africa, a startup in Nigeria, and I applied to Kellogg, Booth, Columbia, Ross, and Tuck. Got into interview invites from Tuck, Ross, Kellogg, and Booth. Got accepted to Ross and Kellogg, and I'll be attending Kellogg. For applicants, a word of advice is so. While you're getting into this application cycle, be prepared to grind while you are working, because while it may look like there's a few things that you have to do, there's a lot more work that goes into doing it. And it's not a school by school thing, but it's rather an entire story that you have to build for yourself, and if that story is built and if your goals are set, then all your applications are set to go. So it's not like you have to put in X amount of effort for each school, but it's some X amount of effort that you have to apply for your entire story, and then it's incremental effort for each school. So have that solid entire story ready. That is more important than thinking school wise.
Excellent. I think those are some really, really wise words. So I think let's get started right in. So why an MBA? Shreyas, as you said, you were at an HR tech firm. Mohit, you were already working at this, South African, firm in Nigeria about, the whole, I don't want to get into all the details of everyone's professional background, but even Kshitij in digital strategy. How, y'all, from what I saw that, y'all had a good career path going in. Y'all were doing extremely well for yourselves. Y'all could have had opportunities even through networking. Why did you decide to disrupt that path and go for an MBA?
Sure, I can take a go at it first. MBA is actually a big investment, both professionally and personally. I was very happy with the current role I had at Airtel. But I also felt that there is an opportunity for me to work with some of the larger players in markets which have, for example, been more advanced in connectivity innovation, which was my area of interest. So that was one. But secondly, from a personal side, my partner was also applying to her master's program abroad. And that sort of kind of made the decision for me that it's the right time to not only invest on, on an MBA, but also, just to be there with my partner. So it's a mix of both professional and personal reasons.
Awesome. What about you, Mohit?
So for me, quite honestly, I wanted to make a switch from the FMCG industry to investment banking, and that is why I wanted to do an MBA, because without an MBA, it was quite honestly difficult for me to switch from a completely different field to banking. So that is why I decided to do an MBA.
Excellent. Do you also recommend that, anyone who's making a switch which is that drastic also go for a pre-MBA internship?
I would recommend someone doing that, because I did the same, though it was not physical. It was a virtual internship, but it certainly helped me understand what I wanted to do and give me a clearer picture to if I really wanted to pursue it. So that is super critical. And I think applying in round one helps with doing that, because you had a 6-month period to do your internship, and that will help you frame your opinion on if you really wanted to do it or not.
Understood. Tell me, Shreyas, how about you?
Sure. So I had a couple of reasons as to why I wanted to do the MBA. The first up was so I always saw myself being in a leadership position, a CEO, CXO level, and obviously all of that I realized that needs a lot of management that you need to soft and hard skills that you need to pick up. And I unfortunately haven't received much of formal management education. Right? I've done my undergrad in aerospace. And so I kind of felt that, doing an MBA is basically going to help me give me this set of soft and hard skills that I need. So that was one point. The other was, as It's a very personal thing to me as well, is that I very much like Mohit. I wanted to pivot into a sector that I'm very passionate about. And so I kind of felt that, having worked across, data analytics and consulting, and also having experience in startup, I kind of figured that, okay, enough is enough. I think now it's time to actually pivot and go into a sector that I'm passionate about, which essentially is sports business. And so that's basically why I wanted to do an MBA right now, so that I'd be in a good position to sort of move into that industry post the MBA, considering the various opportunities that are available for sports business in USP schools. I think you're on mute, Preeti.
Okay, so now, so I think that's clear, and let's talk a little bit about test prep, right? Now, Hiral is not here, but she and I think Mohit, you guys had Mohit, you have a very high score, like you have the dream 750 score, right? How did you approach your preparation? How long did it take for you from to start to finish to get that score?
So I took 2.5 months to 3 months of prep to get to that score. I was weak in verbal, especially in sentence correction and critical reasoning. So I went through a lot of videos for sentence correction, e-GMAT videos for sentence correction, Manhattan for sentence correction, and videos by Veritas Prep for critical reasoning, and a few videos by GMAT Ninja. So they are available on YouTube. I went through those videos, and I did the OG official guide. And I looked for certain 700 plus level questions, and I think that helped me improve my verbal score. Quant thankfully wasn't an issue. So one thing that also did a week before the exam was buy the advanced level questions that are sold by MBA.com. I think it's for $30. You could buy it, and it will certainly help you get an edge by helping you understand what the kind of 700 plus level questions that MBA.com typically has in your exam.
Okay, I think those are really some really good resources. Like even I didn't know about all these, but 2.5 months is pretty aggressive. But I just want, if anyone is listening to this even now, even a year later, that's possible. Okay, and about the verbal part, it's not a surprise. I think I've seen almost every, not every, but most applicants who work with us, have a lower on the verbal score. That's a trend which I have seen as well. Now, Shreyas and Kshitij, you both have a score of 730. Did that bother you when you're applying? Because many people who come, to us, even at this point of time, they're like, I need to get to that 750. Should I apply? Will I even be able to apply? So what were your thoughts when you had that score and you were applying?
Sure, I can go first and then pass it over to Kshitij. Yes, definitely, Preeti. I was quite disheartened with the 730 as well when I was applying it. I had a lot of thoughts in my head as to, is this good enough? Because I checked the average scores for the schools, and then 730, I think 730 or 740 was the cutoff. But then there was a lot of word out in the street that, if you're an Indian, then ideally you should be aiming for nothing short of a 750 or a 760, right? So yes, I had all of these thoughts, but then there came a time where I realized that I really didn't have another option but to apply. So I went ahead with the 730. But at the same time, I kind of realized that I had other things on my profile that I knew would definitely offset the 730. Not to say that 730 isn't competitive. Something like a good GPA from my undergrad, or having a solid, stellar work experience, or having done something in the extracurriculars, I'm sure I knew that would sort of help me offset the 730. So I decided to go ahead with it anyway.
Right. What about you?
Probably just building on top of what Shreyas said, definitely I think the word on the street, and when you talk to most of the alums or the current students, for an Indian average score, which is typically around 740, 750, 730, most of them will suggest just give a second attempt. And just for everyone to know, the average score, the GMAT score, most of these schools, the top schools that we have in US and even Europe is typically lower, but US is typically 730. And within that, the Indian average typically goes above 730. So it's typically recommended that you try to score that score which is 730 above. 730 is almost borderline. But as Shreyas mentioned, that if you feel that your profile, your academic record previously, your work experience so far, has a kind of what we call the star elements, or when I say star elements, basically something which you feel very strongly about and can sort of compensate for that score, I think 730 is a good score to apply with. And that's what we realized, when we went in for the interviews, and finally got our admit offers as well. So just wanted to consider the other trade-off which I faced, of course, for the 730 was why we didn't know that 730 is a good enough or not good enough score to apply as it gets more competitive over the years. That there's a time trade-off. If you are giving your GMAT in July, August, or maybe post-August in September, you probably won't have the time to apply for a second round because you have to put in the time for the application essays, which is definitely the more important part of the entire process. So just do weigh in that trade-off. You can definitely give a second attempt if you want to, because you can cancel that attempt if you score a lower score compared to the score that you have previously. So something to keep in mind, but overall, yes, we were definitely scared applying with a 730 and good that it worked out.
Yeah, I can imagine. Especially, the whole Indian male, applicant is always, but like I think both Shreyas and Chitish said that your undergrad GPA, is also taken into consideration along with your undergrad institution and your undergrad subject selection, which both of them had. So, the school knew that they could crack the academic side of business school curriculum for sure. Now we routinely get asked this question, so I think I'm just going to ask it just for the sake of asking that, whether is the GMAT better or the GRE? Did either of you, on the panel, any of you ever think that should I give the GRE over the GMAT?
I mean, honestly, for me, didn't have a preference. I've seen a few folks who have switched maybe from GMAT to GRE because they felt that the structure or the way the exam format is, it's more conducive to them. But I would let others comment who have probably given both or have an understanding of both. I just chose GMAT as one option because I at least saw that the syllabus or the content that I need to prepare for both were pretty much the same. So I just picked one.
Understood.
I chose the GMAT because, yes, you were saying something?
No, go ahead.
Yeah. So I chose the GMAT because a lot of my seniors had done the same, and I mean, fortunately it worked out for me. But from what I've seen and from what I read on Reddit, GRE has been gaining a lot of traction lately. So it is definitely something that folks can consider if they are not comfortable with the GMAT. And especially a lot of people, a lot of people have given their GRE when they typically think of applying for a master's during their 4th year. So I think folks who have already given the GRE could use the GRE score or could take the GRE again instead of taking the GMAT if they're not comfortable with it.
Understood. Yeah, Shreyas, you wanted to add something.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, I went ahead with the GMAT because obviously, as Mohit said, there was, historically, I think most of the people who go do an MBA usually take the GMAT. But there did come a point in time when I was contemplating whether it made sense to, do the GRE instead and try to see if I could come up with a better score. This was when I plateaued at 730. But then that was a trade-off that I decided, instead of studying all over again for GRE, I kind of figured that if I were to sort of invest that time into my applications and essays, I think that might pay off better. And so I decided to stick with the 730 and just go ahead, stay with the GMAT.
Understood. Now, I wanted to talk about, school selection and a bit of, round 1 versus round 2 as well, right? Now, Shreyas, you worked with us only in round 2. So your round 1 experience is something you can share separately. But Shreyas and Chitish both applied in round 2 and they had good success. Mohit, of course, applied in round 1 and he got both his admits in round 1. So how did each one of you, I want each one of you to tell me, how did y'all select schools? Because school selection is always a trade-off between, what someone feels, what you hear from friends and family, what consultants tell you, what do you feel about a particular school. Did you have any structured process, or did you, how much time did you spend in school selection?
So I can go first. So yeah, Preeti, as you were mentioning, I think for round 1, what I basically told myself was, because I had the 730 even then, that was also a factor in deciding which schools that I wanted to apply to. But that said, I wanted to sort of be in one of the M7 schools. That was my initial thought process for round 1. But unfortunately, none of the results went my way in round 1. And so when it came to round 2, so I had 4 rejects at the end of round 1. And then so when it came to round 2, I had a very very small set of schools to choose from. And so this is when I actually went ahead and did a lot more research as to, basis what my profile is, where do I see myself being a good fit, what are the resources that the school has, in this field. So I was in human capital, so I looked at a lot of schools and what they had specifically for human capital and artificial intelligence and things like diversity and inclusion and all of that. And so basis that, I kind of narrowed down on schools which made sense. And the other thing that I also considered was, of course, the industry that I'm going to be in, which is if I want to pivot into, say, sports business or whatever it is, then what are the resources that school has for that, right? So both those things I considered when I was sort of applying to schools, and then I came up with the short list of 3 schools that I did in round 2.
So yeah, for me, I applied to, as I mentioned, I was looking to switch to banking, so I'd applied to Booth and Columbia. Because they were primarily considered as the finance schools along with Wharton. So I applied to Booth and Columbia, and then I applied to Tuck, Ross, and Kellogg primarily because the culture at the school seemed like the kind of culture that I would resonate with, that I would be able to give my best in. So I applied to those 3 schools. I was a bit late while applying, so it was until mid-July that I had my first call with Preeti. So I think that is late for round 1, and that is why I did not go for any one of HSW, because I also wanted to de-risk it, and therefore I took the schools that I took. I did go for HSW in round 2, but none of them worked out. So yeah.
Yeah, Kshitij, how did you choose the schools that you picked?
Right, Preeti. I
You
think very.
European schools, right?
Sorry, Preeti, can you repeat that?
You applied to US and European schools.
Yes, I was just about to come to that. I think very similar on the basis of what Shreyas and Mohit decided schools as well. I mean, the first step was definitely deciding that the area of interest that you have, does it have a better scope in US or Europe or both? And just because I wanted to keep my options open to going to either of the continents, so I just chose, made a list of almost 10 schools across both US and Europe. And then, of course, then the same steps that one can follow just to narrow down that list, where you search the alumni base on LinkedIn, for example, in your area of interest. How many people do you find working in that specific area? You can look at the website of the different schools just to see the kind of programs, different initiatives. For example, Shreyas mentioned the diversity initiative. Similarly, you have multiple initiatives running at every school, which can further help network with students in that area. So that's, I think, also very critical. And then third is when you have at least some sense of what the schools are doing and where the alum base is strong for your area, you definitely need to talk to the current students and alumni just so that you can validate some of your assumptions and then make that list of schools. Because applying to more than 4 or 5 schools is a headache, to put it crudely, and it's a huge effort. So very important that you sort of optimize your time and effort in both round 1 and round 2, and then accordingly just prioritize the schools that you want to go to, apply to.
I agree, because I advise that apply to a mix of dream and target schools or dream target safety schools in round 1 and have dream target safety schools in round 2. With Kshitij, I think there was a situation of a job change right around round 1, so we had to push to round 2. We had no choice, and Shreyas, we only worked in round 2. But usually, I think with what we did, with what I think Mohit did rather, was really good. I think just applying. He had admits at the end of round 1. Then of course he took some risks in round 2, which didn't work, but at least there was an admit in hand. So that's, I think, the whole round 1 versus round 2, debate. But I think Kshitij is a living example that even if you don't apply to a single school in round 1, there is still hope. So I think that's, because we get asked this, I think everyone asks this question: should I just apply in round 1 or round 2? It's only that, if you apply in round 1, and you don't get in, you still have round 2. If you apply in round 2 and you don't get in, then you have to move to the next year. That's the only thing. Okay. So I think school selection, is definitely, I think, a key aspect, as Shreyas rightly pointed out, that, you have to take that step back and really understand your profile and see given your profile, what post MBA goals, you want to, have, and then, based on those goals, which are the schools which fall into your purview, right? Now, I want to understand that, so business schools are, interested in putting together a diverse class of collaborative leaders, who would contribute to their community in a meaningful and a purposeful manner, as current students and also future going as alumni. Now, all three of you are from an overrepresented pool, okay? Overrepresented pool of the Indian male engineer, okay? Or like I said, you all had great pedigree, great GPA, but differentiating yourself becomes very, very difficult, right? As you will see in your seniors, so many people apply to the same schools. They go, you have an advantage over there because the business schools know the undergrad institution. So you definitely, have that ace up your sleeve. But how did you differentiate yourself?
Yep, maybe I can go first. So, I mean, as Preeti mentioned, definitely an overrepresented pool. And in Indian, I think the number of applicants that we have, specifically from this diaspora, makes the process more competitive across, I think, most of the schools that you're going to apply to. I think 2 pointers which I can raise as a means to differentiate yourself would be, number one, do your research properly. The amount or the content that you sort of drive out of the alumni and the current students, just so that you can understand the school motto, the clubs, the different areas of the, of initiatives better. I think it just helps you bring out that essay part, as well as doing the interviews, that content together more comprehensively, that you have what it takes to be, to be fit for the school. A second part of that is, don't discount the impact of small things. It's quite possible a lot of folks from your own pedigree, from your own work experience in private equity, consulting, will be applying as well. But what makes, I think, every candidate different is, what are the smaller things that you might have done, which could be, which could be many things, which could be working on different initiatives, starting a new NGO, working with an NGO, starting a new dance class in your city. Any smaller thing which really helps sort of differentiate the kind of person or the personality that you have. And that would be very helpful.
Okay.
Shreya, over to you.
Thanks, Kshitij. Quite similar to what Kshitij said. In fact, I had a couple of things a pathway to I figured that I could use to sort of differentiate myself. The first was, of course, in terms of the professional life and the work it is that I was doing. And so I was working in a field, of course, in human capital, doing people analytics and helping companies leverage artificial intelligence to help them build diverse and inclusive workplaces. And so I knew that there weren't too many people out there who were doing that. And I think the added benefit was the fact that I was doing this from a startup, which was in a hyper growth trajectory. So I basically leveraged that to sort of differentiate myself in the professional front. And on the personal front as well, as Kshitij was mentioning, something like a dance class. So I was very passionate about cricket since a very young age. And what I'd also done was I had played a lot of professional cricket during my time, during my undergrad as well as post undergraduate days. So I basically leveraged on that. And I'd also done some social work around cricket, helping underprivileged kids. I used to sort of mentor and coach underprivileged kids. So I sort of leveraged that aspect as well, to set myself apart. And I think these definitely came in handy when you were to sort of offset the 730 GMAT. Just tying it back to the previous question. Over to you, Mohit.
Thank you, Shreyas. So for me, I was fortunate that my industry was not the typical consulting or investment banking. So I was in FMCG, and my geography was also Africa. So that certainly helped me have an edge in the application process. Another thing that I would want to mention is I did not have any well-known organization on my resume. But even if you don't have a well-known organization, if you are able to demonstrate that you have had impact in your organization, I think that certainly helped. So for me, my current organization, Omnibus Africa, it helped me because I was one of the 3 people who started the organization, and we scaled up pretty quickly. So to a revenue of more than $50 million in almost a year and a half. So I think that helped me differentiate from the typical Indian male engineer pool. Secondly, another thing that helped me during the application process was leveraging on personal experiences, life experiences. And I think a combination of the two helped me massively, immensely during the application process.
Yeah, I think those are very, very specific words of advice, and I cannot stress this enough. So, all said and done, this is a business school application. So your resume is front and center. No matter what you do, they have to know, one, that you have the academic chops to handle the rigor of the curriculum, and whether professionally, when they see how you have contributed, if you are, working in some of the careers of the future, and, surprisingly enough, tech is a very strong angle, tech startup in all of your profiles, which is it's a huge focus for business school recruitment, because that's where recruiters are coming, and schools also need to kind of mirror, what the business and the economy needs, along with, they need to mirror the same into their recruiting efforts as well. Okay. We're going to speak a little bit about, essays. Okay. I think you guys already touched upon the fact that have some foundational work, do that research, have your story in place already. Mohit, you spoke about that you don't go school by school, just have some foundational base story already in place before you approach targeting every school. So Kshitij, can you share some advice about how to go developing the HBS essay? Yours, I think, was the last year when there was no word limit. Starting this year, HBS essay has a word limit of 900 words. So if anyone wants to apply to Harvard, yes. So anyone who wants to apply to Harvard Business School, how do you recommend that they go, developing the essay?
Sure, Preeti. I think when we were writing essays for Harvard and plus the other schools as well, I think there was a very clear sense of what the schools are looking for. Some of the schools are more external driven, where they want to see how you will fit with the school, contribute to the school, basically looking from that perspective. And then there were certain schools like NCR or Harvard, which are more driven by your own internal, by your own journey, personal journeys, your internal priorities, and the kind of person you bring out in your essays in front of them. So I think for these kind of essays, one sort of process or framework which helped me a lot was, one, list down all the key pivots that you have in your journey so far, from college to your first choice of work, to your change of work, any new initiative you started, why did you start working in a village, all the key pivots or the sort of important moments in your life which are important or significant for you, and then reflect on the underlying theme of that journey. What was it for? I think that sort of storyline, which I think brings out the kind of priorities you have as a person, that really helps in these essays, especially for Harvard and NCR, where they're looking for some personal angle. I think that helped a lot for the HBS essay.
Yeah, that was really nice and very, very short and very succinct, but yet makes complete sense. Shreyas and Mohit, what challenges did each one of you face when it came to MBA, essay development? Okay, and can each one of you, boil down to 3 key pieces of advice that you would like to, give anyone who's watching this when it comes to MBA essay development? What were your challenges and what is your advice?
So, firstly, I would want to second Kshitij's point about reflecting on all your on why you have done what you have done on certain critical junctures in your life, because that certainly helps you give a reason to your journey or what you have done at those points in time. Secondly, based on my experience, I've noticed that schools typically have 2 to 3 questions, and those questions are more along the lines of, so one question will always be about goals and you being able to justify why a certain school would fit your long-term, short-term goal. Another essay would typically be a personal essay, so wherein you have to show your values. So and I think a third essay is always some fundu essay. So I can't comment a lot about those essays, but primarily you have these 2 kind of essays. So you need to know how the school fits into your long-term and short-term goal, and weave that into your story, be it courses, be it through courses, be it through clubs, but particularly have something that is specific to the B school and that is not available at the other B schools. So that will make you stand out. I remember Preeti showing me like a paragraph from a sample essay for Wharton, and I think that helped me understand about those essays. The second one is personal essays. So personal essays, the problem that I faced during personal essays was I used to write novels. It was not an essay, it was a novel. And then fortunately, my consultant helped me cut it down to less than 450 words. But being succinct is very important. And yeah, that's my 2 words.
Cool. Shreyas?
Yeah, Preeti, just to add to just to chime in quickly. In terms of challenges that I faced, I think there was one very big challenge that I was always faced with, and I'll just put it out there in case someone else also faces this challenge. I have this habit of sort of underselling myself, or not playing out the story to have to be actually what it is, but trying to be overly modest about it. And that would sort of reflect in the essays when I write them. And but there was so much more to the story than what I'd actually written, right? So, and I think this is where working with the consultants kind of helped me, and that was a massive challenge for me as well, to sort of change my thought process and make sure that I stop underselling myself and know actually what my worth is, and sort of put that down on paper. And so that was like a massive challenge that I faced, and then that is something that I'd like to share with everyone as well, because if there's someone out there who's doing that, please don't. It is not going to help you at all, because the competition is obviously intense, and it is very likely that most people out there are not going to be underselling, but perhaps even overselling it a bit. So the least you can do is actually put out what it's actually worthy of, rather than oversell. So yeah, that is my 2 cents on that.
Yeah, and it's interesting you say that, especially when you're coming from an intensely competitive, applicant pool. You went to undergraduate institutions where it was very competitive. So, you already see people who are amazing around you. So you go in thinking that, I'm probably amazing, but maybe not as amazing,
So Preeti, definitely just adding one quick thing, what Shreyas highlighted here, and I think it's a very important point for everyone to note about the application process, that when you are doing so much self-reflection, you will feel vulnerable. You will start doubting what you did or what you did not do. And that's very important to keep in mind, that, have an open mind, be sure that you're not underselling yourself. Very important to emphasize this. And talk to people, talk to your friends, show them the content, make sure that you are bringing out your entire impact, this personality that you have had so far. Very important point. Thanks, Shreyas, for bringing that up. I think that does the call with every applicant. Preeti, back to you.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Include, I think, it's important to include friends and family in the process, but taking advice from too many can sometimes, backfire. But do show things to them to the extent that, is this me? Do you think this is me? Right? And many of these, especially for US business schools that require a lot of self-reflection, that really helps. Sometimes someone may say that, this is something very interesting about you, and you're like, oh, I never thought this was interesting about me. At least it's important in self-reflection. Eventually, you decide what you put in and what you don't, right? So we do have 12 questions already. So I think I'm going to just have 2 last questions. We're just going to speak quickly about the interview preparation. Okay. Kshitij and Mohit, you experience interviews by both adcoms and alums. So just so that everyone knows, Harvard Business School has an adcom interview. So they have access to your entire application. They can ask you anything under the sun, absolutely anything. And it's a resume-based interview. But there's you also faced alumni interview, like Mohit, you had an alumni interview at Kellogg, and also at Booth. But I will come to Wharton's team-based discussion, Shreyas, a little later. But Kshitij and Mohit, can you all tell me what is the difference? What difference did you face between an adcom interview and an alum interview?
So one thing that jumps straight out to me is adcom is that alumni or second year students typically will follow a certain procedure. So if you use the sample questions, or if you look up on GMAT Club, you will find questions that have been asked to people, and that is what people generally follow, because they have been given a guideline, so they won't go off that guideline. So if you have an alum or a second year student who's interviewing you, you could be fairly certain that there's a set procedure that they will be following, and that GMAT Club sample questions are a fair representation of what you will be asked. With adcoms, it can go anywhere. So the adcom interview that I had was in fact with Kellogg, and the interview was all random. I did not expect the first question to be what it was, and it just started with, what do you like about your what are the 2 things that you like about your undergrad days, and it just went off from there. So adcom interviews can be tricky, but at the same time, I think the best part about adcom interviews is that they are completely unbiased, because they don't have that bias.
Kshitij?
Yeah, I think totally building on top of what Mohit said, ArtCom typically will look at your entire application, your entire submission, and they can pick up any specific point from your application anywhere. I mean, I was asked about my hometown, how it was while I was growing up. That was the first question of the interview. So definitely helps, I think, in general, to look at the GMAT Club questions that most of the previous candidates have put up, because it will at least give you a sense of what the overall template is going to be for the school, especially, and I think that's for both ArtCom as well as student-driven interviews. But yes, when it comes to ArtCom-driven interviews, please be very thorough with your submission. Be very sharp and precise in your answers, because they will have some maybe 10, 15 questions, 15, 20 questions even that they want to cover. Depending on either some confusion or some clarification or something more that they want to know about that particular story. So they have a list of those 20 questions, and it will be in your benefit if you are able to cover those 20 questions. And that's where you need to practice each and every part of your submission in terms of how do I sort of summarize it better and succinctly. I think that's very important for ArtCom-driven interviews. For student-driven interviews, they will have a broad sort of set of guidelines on what they should ask about from the interviewees. One thing which at least helps in that area is that they will also try to see you as a potential classmate. So if you're able to sort of strike that connection, not going, of course, overboard with your answers, taking them too long, but, there will be certain angles or certain student perspectives which they will also relate to. So always, I think that fluidity will help you when you're sort of trying to tell them your story and why you're doing something and why you're doing an MBA now. So overall, ArtCom, be sharp and precise. Students, you can sort of bring out more deeper parts of your story.
Perfect. And I must add in here that, sometimes, let's say a school like Kellogg, typically you have alumni interviews, but because they interview about 70% of the applicant pool, sometimes you get an option to interview with an AdCom over an alum. And I would totally encourage that, if you get an opportunity to interview with the AdCom, please take it, okay, over an alum or a second-year student. That is always, always advisable. Shreyas, now let's talk a little bit about Wharton's unique team-based discussion format. Kshitij also participated in that. He also got into Wharton. But Shreyas, what was, your experience? And anyone, so one thing about interviews, I do want to say that, as members of AGAC, I hear this from schools all the time, that interviews are overlooked. It's an overlook. We are looking forward to the interview as much as we look forward to reading the rest of the application. And people are not taking it as seriously. So we are in fact telling, some of our applicants that, start preparing for the interview from right now, okay? For Wharton's unique team-based discussion format, how did you prepare?
Sure. So basically what happens is the day you get the call for the interview or the invite for the TBD rather, you are given a prompt that Wharton sort of gives you a prompt, and you have about, say, 3 to 4 weeks time to sort of prepare or pick. You can pick and choose which date and time you want to sort of have that TBD. There are certain slots that you can pick from. And once that is done, basically, so I, for one, I'd never been part of any group discussion or team-based discussion ever in my life, not even in my undergrad days. So I was panicking, obviously. But I think the good thing that I did was I did a lot of practice mock team-based discussions. And then I usually had like someone to moderate them, or either a student or an alum, or perhaps even some of the consultants to sort of moderate them. And then there were a lot of learnings that I sort of picked up from there, and I'd just observe I'd observe a few mocks as well. There'd be six other people, and I'd just sit back, take the back seat, and see what it is that they're doing. And so it was basically like a process. It's a trial and error process where you sort of fine tune yourself until you basically get to the actual team-based discussion. In my case, what worked was a lot of practice. In my case, I'm going to put it out there. In my case, what worked was a lot of practice. But I do know of a couple of people who have also been admitted who never did a team-based discussion, never practiced before the actual team-based discussion, or did just a couple because they didn't want to risk sounding very robotic or mechanical, right, or very over-rehearsed, if I can put it that way. But I, for one, knew that what worked for me was I knew that I had accumulated a lot of practice, and I knew what would work well for me and what wouldn't. And so to understand what would work well and what wouldn't, I had to do that practice, right? So that worked for me. So it depends on the kind of person you are. If you're the kind where you're just okay doing 1 or 2 and you're happy contributing to a group in a group setting in the actual TBD, that's great too. But you have to figure that out for yourself as to what sort of person you are. You're on mute, Preeti.
Guys, you need to stop muting me. Okay, there was disturbance. Sorry. I think I think what the takeaway point, I think, from what you made, Shreyas, I think what stood out really for me is figure out for yourself whether you need. There's no one way that you need to do 100 mocks or you need to do 10 or whatever. You have to decide whether I need more practice. Am I feeling like myself or not? And then I think you take it from there. But I think getting feedback throughout the process is very important. We do have 15 minutes, and I wanted to ask one more question. And there are like some 17 questions already. Now, my last question to you guys is, the MBA application is a long drawn process, right? From when you decide to go for it till the date you receive that, coveted congratulatory email or phone call. I remember, getting that news for all of you and how happy we were internally. But you not to mention, you also cope with some rejections along the way, right? For Kshitij, I remember he applied to 5 schools and he got through 4, but he was always asking, why did the 5th one reject me? It's always hard, right? It's always hard. How did each of you stay motivated through the entire journey? Because we, when we are working, we go through the same stress, not just for a few, but for everyone. How did you guys stay motivated?
I can go first. In fact, funnily enough, Preeti, I was on the other end of the spectrum as to what Kshitij was. He had, I think, I had 6 rejects, and the one school that I wanted to get in the most, thankfully, gave me an admit. So yes, so round 1 especially was very disheartening because I had 4 rejects, and to even muster up the courage to go ahead and do it in round 2, I was actually pondering whether this made sense and whether whether am I actually good enough to be in these B schools. And all of those thoughts will creep in because you're only human. It happens with everyone. It happens to the best of us. But I think you have to brush that aside. And I'm sure everyone has their own support system and way of dealing with things. But at the end of the day, the maximum you can do is sort of put your best foot forward and hope for the best, right? So the way I sort of handled rejection was, I sort of learned over the rejections that I had. I had 6 rejections and finally Wharton came through. But I kind of realized that, there's only so much you can do and the rest of it isn't in your hands. So whatever is in your control, try to perfect that and try to make sure that is bulletproof. And as for whether it goes through, whether you get the admit or not eventually is not in your control. So there's really not much you can do about that. But at the same time, make sure you sort of put the best version of yourself out there for them to see and hope that it goes through.
Absolutely, Shreyas. I think one clear thing that we realized during this process was nothing is in our control. Once you have done your applications, you have done your interview, the kind of sort of code you will see, what we are seeing in our code, in our groups as well, it's a very different kind of group. It's sort of a mix of everyone's different backgrounds, different kind of GMAT scores, different pedigrees and different sort of brand names in the resume. So I think definitely nothing that will be in your control. Very important to just keep that in mind, that you have started a race. If you have selected 3 to 5 schools that you want to apply to, you have to finish that and you have to give your best across all those schools. Definitely in the round, for example, when I missed round 1, I was very concerned that, I'm going to put all my eggs in one basket in round 2. I won't know what's working or what's not working in my application. And definitely there will be different factors. At the end, you will be working in your jobs, you will have certain family emergencies, engagements, anything that comes up. And what might affect your application. So just be cognizant of the fact that a bit of luck will play a factor too in this entire process, and just put your best foot forward. Absolutely. What?
So for folks to keep yourself motivated, one word of advice is typically between 2 schools you will have a week or 10 days of gap. So once you are done with an application, once you have submitted an application, take a break for a couple of days and then get back to the grind. So fortunately for me, it worked because all my applications had a space of at least a week between them, and starting from Turk to Columbia. So I took a 2-day break and then I went back to the grind. And another important thing is, don't wait for your essays. Don't try to make the perfect essay in your first attempt. Have the first draft ready. If you are not done with your first draft, there won't be any iterations. So have that first draft, no matter how rough it is. Have that first draft. That is super important. So yeah.
Just to add to that, I guess, I mean, one of the things that I also did, especially in round 2, was sort of keep a positive mindset and a positive frame of mind overall. And I remember Preeti telling me that you have to, and it's probably what most sports persons do, is, you sort of visualize yourself in the school, you sort of reinforce those positive thoughts in your head. And I kept doing that to myself, every time rejection came up, saying, I will still make it. And I think what you have to realize at the end of the day is you only have to be right once. You just need, I mean, so long as you're willing to go to any of the schools that you're applying to, you only have to be right once. So, yeah.
I think brilliant words. I think I can talk on just this one question on motivation and tips and tricks and strategies and project management for, I think, 1 hour, but we don't have that time. So anyone who has any questions about this specific aspect, please reach out to any one of these guys on LinkedIn. I hope, they will, answer your questions and now we are going to take some questions online. We will not be able to answer all the questions. There are like some 21 questions and we just have 10 minutes. I'm just going to scroll through, and whatever questions I think you guys need to answer, I'll just direct it to you. Okay, hello and thanks for sharing insights. Ignore this if you already discussed this question. I missed the beginning. How many schools did you apply? What was your school selection strategy? That is covered. You can go and check the recording. May you mention which school you got admitted? So Chitij is going to Harvard, Mohit is going to Kellogg, and Shreyas is going to Wharton. Which one with financial aid available, and what is the best strategy in school selection if financial aid is a must to a candidate? Was financial aid a critical factor for any of you?
Absolutely. I mean, I can just probably take a stab at this one. So one of the reasons why I applied to multiple schools was also just to make sure that I have either sufficient opportunities in different schools for a financial aid. Most of the schools have sort of a merit-based scholarship where either Wharton or NCR or LBS have different sponsors for the scholar, for various scholarships in different areas of interest or basis, your resume or your background. And they will offer you basis the merit, which comes alongside your admission decision. In certain cases like Harvard, it's a need-based scholarship. So for example, if you are on Indian salaries or have worked in NGOs for a long time, so they sort of try to compensate for that and give you a decent scholarship as well. So I won't say there's any specific requirements in most of the schools for a scholarship. I think for NCR, you have to write scholarship-specific essays as well, separately after you get an admit. And for most of the other schools, if you are considered for any of the of the merit-based scholarships, you will get alongside your admission results.
Interesting. And a follow-up to that question is brand versus financial aid. Which side do you choose now that you are already in the business schools?
When you say brand is basically the external scholarships?
Brand of the school.
The brand of the school. All right. Folks, I think, again, that's very subjective to what your immediate financial goals are going to be. For some, if you want to have, for example, you feel very passionate about a particular school, about the lifestyle, where, your network, your alum, or people that you've seen on LinkedIn, the way they have sort of built up their career is something which is very exciting to you. Then the scholarship amount, or if zero financial aid, might not be a big factor in the long term. Eventually, all the people that I've spoken to across different schools who have not got a financial aid, but they took a different loan, or they paid out the entire tuition fee for 2 years through the loans that they got, and they did it like in an instant. For example, the decision for them was not a big factor, because most of the schools that you talk to the alums there, none of them said that they felt any difficulty in paying off their loans. Eventually, most of you will find the decent sort of sector to work that that you're targeting, or the work, or the career switch that you want to make, and it typically happens with these schools. So you won't feel that kind of concern. I know it looks like a huge amount early on, but feel confident and comfortable that a school choice is definitely important. In case you feel there are certain financial constraints that you have, you can try for the scholarships. Again, scholarships are not mostly in your control. So that's just one thing to remember, but it's not a major concern when it comes off to paying off the tuition and the loan amount in the long term.
I agree. It's more like, taking 2 steps back to move 10 steps forward, right?
Absolutely.
Now, is it okay if we ask for their essays from a student ambassador or an alumnus? Now, I have my own thoughts, but this is not about me. This is about the 3 of you. So what do you guys suggest? Did you look at your seniors, your mentors, when you're connecting with current students, did you like, I need to see past essays? Did you all do that? You definitely got no essays from the Red Pen. I just want to put it out there for anyone who's watching this. We don't share, past client essays. We don't do that. We're bound by confidentiality, and it totally beats the purpose. But what did you guys do?
So one feedback which I got from all the Allens that I spoke to was, don't use anyone else's essay, and no one shared it with me. Of course, I wanted to see the kind of for example, even I was a bit inclined to sort of see the kind of flow that they have in their essays, what kind of content do they use. But all of them suggested right up front that, it's not going to work, because most of the times you will try to fit in your story in someone else's template or format, which might have worked better for them. And sort of you end up screwing that one chance where you could have created something original. So honestly, all the others that I spoke to, they refused and advised that not to ask anyone for essay templates that they've used.
What about you, Mohit? Did you do that?
So I used to go through 5 to 10 essays for each school before trying to write the essay, but that was to get an idea of how different people approach their essays. But at the end of the day, as Kshitij rightly pointed out, there's no template, there's no skeleton that you can weave your own flesh around the skeleton to have your essay. It has to be your own skeleton and your own flesh to make your own essay. So while you can refer to some essays, certainly don't use those essays as templates and weave in your story. So that will be force fitting and that won't work.
Okay, cool. Now, Shreyas and Kshitij, there's a question for you, but we'll take it a little later in case Mohit has to jump off first. How did you tackle the interview part? What sources did you practice to have a safe interview? Mohit, why don't you go first?
Preeti, I beg your pardon. Sorry.
What interview? How did you practice for the interview?
Okay, so for the interview, I used to see past questions on GMAT Club, or I used to use the resource that was shared with me by the Red Pen. And based on those questions, there's always a certain flow to these school interviews. So they will ask you, there will be an opening question: why MBA, why the school, long-term, short-term goals. And then there are some behavioral questions. So there's a certain flow. Once you know that flow, have 3 or 4 mocks. After your 3rd or 4th mock, you will realize that you have gotten considerably better at it compared to your first interview. And after that, there always has to be some impulsiveness in you, because the questions are not going to be the same, but there is a pattern. So if you have given 3 to 4 mocks, after that you will be comfortable with those questions, and you will be able to face those curveballs.
Understood. Okay, now here's a very interesting question, and this person wants to know from all 3 of you, anonymous, what are your plans if H1B doesn't work? Kshitij, Shreyas, and Mohit.
All right. Okay, by the way, that's a real challenge. I mean, for most of the folks who have just completed their MBAs in the last 2-3 years, and at least I would have seen in my network that most of those actually came back to India. One good thing which has happened is, and most of them found sort of roles that they were looking for in the right sectors in India itself, which is going on to show that most of these global MBAs, even though you're spending a lot there, you might find the right opportunity, the right role, which will help you to pay off the loan as well as work in India if you have to, if you're forced to come back to it. One thing which is also happening is, if you get into a school of your preference, some of the other countries like UK and Canada have opened up their visas for long term, for if you want to apply to jobs there, in case if you don't prefer to come back to India. So that's also one of the options that you will have. But of course, visa is something which is probably the most ridiculous process that's there in the United States at the moment. There's nothing anyone can do about it. Even the schools will pretty much raise their hands that they can't help you with it. So yeah, look out for your options. People are definitely finding the options in India, and of course, then your other countries that you can look at.
Awesome. Now there's going to be, I think Mohit has to jump off. So there's going to be one last question, which I want to ask everyone. There are still 16 questions. So if Kshitij and Shreyas have some time, then we can still stay and answer some of the questions. And then Mohit, I think you can jump off after this question. Yeah. When did you first approach or start working with a consultant? I think for Mohit, this is a really horrible question because he started like 6 weeks before. But Mohit, why don't you go first?
So for me, it was the mid of July when I had my first call with Preeti, and I had taken my GMAT on 8th or 7th July, and after a week of searching, I spoke to Preeti. So it was all quick, calls after calls, and so there was no time to breathe. I had to push back slightly on work and had to make it possible. So for folks who are out there, even if you have 6 weeks, 5 weeks left, fine, you can still do it. You will have to push back on work a bit, but it is still doable. And yeah, give that time. And there's always round 2, so don't worry. If in case you are not able to apply to a ton of schools in round 1, fine, apply to 3 or maybe 2 or 3 schools, but give it your best shot. Don't just apply to 5 schools for the sake of applying to 5 schools. Apply to 2 or 3 schools, and then apply to the rest of your target or say for dream schools in round 2. So yeah, you could do that.
Understood. Mohit, if you have to jump off, you can, because it's past 7, and then I think we will take the rest.
I'll just drop my email address just in case if people have any questions, they could. I don't see. I can't type.
You will not. So I think, I think they can reach out to you on LinkedIn, I believe.
Yeah.
I tagged you, the Red Pen has tagged you in the post. So I think you can definitely reach out to Mohit on LinkedIn. And so same for Shreyas and Kshitij, because we had the same questions last year, that can we reach out to these people? Okay. So you take care, Mohit, and if anyone contacts me, then I'm going to share your email address and your LinkedIn profile.
All right, Preeti. Thank you. And thank you, Shreyas, and thank you, Kshitij.
So much for your generosity.
Thanks,
Bye, Mohit.
Have a lovely evening. Good.
Bye. So I think we are just going to take a couple of last questions. Shreyas and Kshitij, there's a question for both of you. Shreyas, Kshitij spoke about the small aspects, say dance, cricket, NGO. Should a paper proof be shown, like a certificate or referrals?
They haven't asked me anything so far.
Same for me. I mean, I think after the admit, they don't ask for anything.
I believe they do background checks.
They do a background check, yes. That is definitely there. But they haven't asked any proof for things that we mentioned so far. But that's not to say that you can misuse that system and write whatever it is that you want. Because if you get caught, then it's going to be a problem. So yeah, keep it authentic. But yeah, there is a background check that happens after.
So agree with Shreyas. I think so far nothing in the verification of background checks which specifically asks for each of your activities or proof of that. But if you are writing something which may or may not be true, it will come out in the interview. I mean, they are going to grill you in the best way possible. If you make it, maybe good for you, but I think it's not a very good strategy to risk everything on a pointer which may not be right. So just be confident about the fact that you can bring out your stories. Of course, as Shreyas mentioned, some people will be overselling what they have done as well. But I think it's sort of a judgmental call where you need to make sure that you can sort of justify and stand by what you have done. So just because it can be just a matter of perspective as well. Just be sure about that. Agree.
There's a question, does Wharton HBS Kellogg require 16 years of education? Not necessarily, because I know there are people who are chartered accountants and who still apply and go to these schools. So they have 15 years of education. Okay, now here's an interesting question. What challenges did you face after acceptance that you hadn't estimated already?
I can take that. So I was, in fact, funnily enough, I was telling Preeti that the process after the admit, I think is more tiresome than the application process itself. But one big challenge that I faced was basically getting my hands on that F1 visa, because there were very few slots that were open. So yeah, that is definitely a challenge. I'm happy to talk more about the post MBA admit process later on, but getting right now with whatever's happening around the world and how the US embassy, US consulates are shut. So getting your hands on that visa is slightly tricky.
Maybe presenting the other side of it is most of the schools will try to make it a very smooth process for you to get onboarded. They will connect you on different groups, Slack channels with your cohort and batchmates. So overall, the process is kept really smooth, which is within the control of the schools. Again, these are a very ludicrous process, and that's something which will take time. The schools will try to help you out in sort of making your documentation ready as soon as possible. But yes, I think depending on circumstances, hopefully next year onwards, it will be much better than what we have seen during COVID and this year. But I think overall, the process post the admission is pretty smooth.
Understood. Now we are going to take a last question. Is it good to mention names of alumni in your essays who you have connected with for knowing about the college and its initiatives?
I did that. I did mention a few names of alumni and current students who I spoke to, not just in my essay, but also in the interview as well. So I don't think it does any harm. In fact, it just goes on to show that you've done your research and you're excited to know more about what the school has to offer. But I don't overdo it, is what I'd probably say. There's you have to strike a fine balance. So you probably know what that balance is for yourself.
I think same, absolutely. One thing which many schools will ask for is, for example, how do you wish to contribute to the school? And sometimes just to make sure that you are contributing to the right area or something which has not been done in school already, you will talk to someone. And sort of when you mention that name in the interview or in the application essay, sort of validates, or sort of gives it sort of like a validation that an authenticity that, this person really spoke to someone in the club, understands what's not been done and what could be done better. So I think just to bring out that entire element of effort as well as, your understanding, it will help to have the names with you. And of course, some of the alums that you spoke to, even they will say very upfront that, if you want to use my name, you can.
Okay, I think there are two last questions. I mean, there are actually 15 questions, but there are these two questions which I can answer. Shouldn't one only have one GMAT or GRE attempt? It will highlight the level of competency once one holds with the curriculum of the MBA school one can handle or compete with. Not exactly. You'll be surprised to know that school will, beyond, I think there's a reason why the number of attempts are capped at 5. There's a reason for that. Because beyond a point, you hit a wall and it's okay. Then you have to accept the kind of score that, you get. But in fact, we recommend that, if you're taking more than one attempt, show that progress. What schools are looking for is that improvement in score. So please do that. The other question, I think I can answer this on your behalf. How did you start your essays? First set of drafts, that's going to be a very long conversation. And did you use any special softwares to improve your essays prose quality? I don't think you guys did. No, they did not do any and I would discourage using any software. The only software that you can use is if you find any sort of a plagiarism software online. Please, I would encourage you that not only that you use it, but please bring it to my attention as well, that we can because we have been looking for things like that, because we usually guide people in first drafts and all, but you never know, sometimes someone can go online, pick up sample essays, copy paste things from somewhere, and there's no check, but schools are doing those checks. So
one of the interesting things which I think one Alan mentioned was, if you have sort of run your essays to different programs, softwares, Grammarly, just to, make the language different a bit better. One thing which will sort of come out across as sort of a paradox is when you're giving your interviews, the language that you use, the tone that you have might be very different than the quality of the essays that you submitted. So even that raises a sort of question mark that someone else helped you out with the essays or differently. So I think that's just one advice, even when you're working with any consultant, working with different folks, don't change the overall structure of the content of the essays too much that it just comes across as a different person. Just maintain that authenticity.
Absolutely great advice. If and I think there was one a person, I think you'll meet this Kshitej, who I'm talking about, but he had on one of the webinars he did for GMAT Club, he had said that if a consultant offers to write your essays, run as fast as you can. You cannot have anyone else write your essays. It's going to backfire for sure. Okay. Now that being said, I think we still have 13 questions and we are not going to be able to get through that. So guys, do feel free to reach out to us, or do feel free to reach out to Shreyas or Kshitej or Mohit, on their LinkedIn profiles, or write to us and we are happy to share their email addresses with you. And thank you so much, everyone, for attending, and really heartfelt thanks to Shreyas and Kshitej, of course, Mohit, for taking the time out, for your generosity. Really thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I wish you nothing but the very, very, very best, in your business school journey, and from everyone, at the Red Pen. And may you just have, multifold successes in years to come. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Preeti.
Thank you so much, Preeti. All the best to everyone.